Hi, friend. Logan Clements here with the Better Events Podcast. And in this week's episode, Peggy and I are talking all about one of your questions that we actually got from a listener to our email. And this one was all about capacity. And how do you know how many events you, as an event planner and event producer, can manage? And we actually break this down, kind of compare and contrast our journeys and how we've evolved in how we would attack this question, as well as some best practices for how to manage your time and all of the decisions and tasks we have to do when you are managing more than one event at a time. So, without further ado, let's get into the episode.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Better Events Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Logan Clements, and I'm joined this week by guest co-host Peggy Katz. And I am thrilled for this discussion we're about to have today, talking about managing multiple events and your capacity. But before we get into that, we have our conversation starter. It's starting to get a little bit warmer out, Peggy. So what is your go-to ice cream order? Or if you're not an ice cream gal, like a cold treat alternative?
I am definitely mint chocolate chip and iced coffee if I'm not getting ice cream. So
I love a mint chocolate chip. I have been feeling particularly nostalgic. My go-to like beach ice cream order was peanut butter ripple, which is just like vanilla ice cream with essentially peanut butter swirls in it. And then specifically with rainbow, depending on your region, jimmies or sprinkles on top.
interesting.
It just the colorful sprinkles with my peanut butter ice cream is so good. Now I'm hungry.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm looking forward to summer for sure. So we got this question from one of you listeners. And I think it's just fascinating. She says, how many events are you able to juggle at once? I tend to get overwhelmed if it's more than 3 events at a time. And I'm just curious about what limits other event pros have. Recently at my job, I've been asked to juggle up to 6 at a time, and it's causing me a bit of panic. Is 6 normal for some or most? Curious about your thoughts. That's a fantastic question.
It is. It really is.
Oh,
I'm
Logan,
like,
where are you at right now?
oof. How many events am I currently juggling? I am juggling off the top of my head. I'm probably in that 5 to 6 range, because I have a 6 that hasn't really started yet, but it's like on my radar. But I do right now have probably 5 active events, meaning they're booked. Some have pre-production, some don't, but you still have to kind of track what's happening with them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say I'm at about 5 currently. How about you, Peggy? Where are you at?
I've got 4 right now. And 4 I'm comfortable with. I think it depends how big a role you have in each of them, and how much you're involved in pre-production. But yeah, right now 4 is okay. 6 I might get a little stressed, and unless it's very targeted and it's like just on site and I have those days available. But yeah, you got to get used to juggling. It's tough.
Yeah. And that's one, my first takeaway for you, listener, and if this is you who asked this question, like there's no right answer to say, oh, if you have 4 events or 3 events, that's the right amount for you. Everybody is different. Also, your seasons of life are different. Event sizes are different. Like it depends, to your point, Peggy, you're saying like how involved you are. So I just think if you had to give an answer, Peggy, I'm interested for like the core part of this question and thinking about capacity, like how many events, let's answer it for you personally. As you, Peggy, have you learned over the years, how many events are you able to juggle at once personally?
Juggle and do well.
Yes.
I would say. I would like a 4 to 5, but then, as you know, we've worked on some pretty long ones. Like if you're at an Olympics and you're there and you're working 3 weeks straight, I have no bandwidth for anything else. So it definitely depends size and scope and how much brain space you have to just code switch with each call, and with each topic. Like it's yeah. Ugh, I don't know.
Yeah. It's a hard question because, like, for me, I would say, I think I figured out current Logan would say I can probably do 2 events where I'm pretty heavily involved in the lead up to them. So, like, heavy pre-production, I'm taking calls each week about them, like, pretty consistently in the weeds. And then the others, and that's where, like, my 5 I have right now, I have 2 that I'm heavily involved with, 2 others that I'm very much, it's more day of, but I do have to just keep track of a couple things. And then the 5th one is very much like we're just getting started, and it will be one of my heavier lifts, but it's farther and farther in the future. So, like, to your point, Peggy, about code switching, is even with 5, it's hard to keep track of. And I'm so detail oriented about certain things. It's like, oh shoot, is it this project or that project? You got to kind of keep it straight. And so I guess I feel for this listener, if it's 6 events they're being asked to do, that they are doing the entire event and they truly overlap, that would be really, really difficult to keep track of all those pieces, versus if it's like, oh, you have 2 if they're in different phases, you might be able to manage it. And 6 spread out over the course of a year is different. But I know for me, one big thing I realized a couple years ago was that I, at the end of the year, reflected on how many events I'd done all year. And I think that year was like 33. And to your point about like the Olympics, but I counted that as like 1. It was 3 weeks, but that counts as 1 event in my 33. And I look back and I went, I don't think I want to do more events like in the quantity than what I just did. Like I've hit the max of like, that's probably the maximum events I actually want to do.
Yeah.
And it was this like light bulb for me of realizing I didn't want to do more. I just wanted to be more selective, especially as a freelancer, like with what I was saying yes to, realizing like that the limit did exist to the number of events I was willing to be a part of each year.
I think it's also important, like you said, the stages of each event. Like as you get closer, you do have to be more responsive, and there's definitely deadlines where you have to be available all day. Whereas earlier on, you can be very clear and say, listen, whatever comes through, I'm going to need 48 hours to turn things around because I'm ramping up for this other event, or I can get back to you. Don't expect anything in less than 24 hours. Whereas when you are closer, you're like, okay, you guys are the priority. I'm responding to you a lot quicker, and I know these decisions have to be made. So yeah, it depends how they're spaced.
Well, and I have nuance I love with when I work with new clients, because that's also the hard part, is if it's a repeat event, you've done it before, like that amount of headspace. And like, I have one client I'm working on. I did this spring that was like, I've probably done this event like for 5 or 6 years, and I love them. They're a great client. And because I've done it for 5 or 6 years, and the core team I work with at the agency I work through, like they're all the same people. Like there's just a certain level of historical knowledge we all have that we don't have to get so tied up in some of the weeds, because we all know and like what to expect, versus a brand new client who says, we don't think we need all this time. We're not sure, they might have a lot of unknowns. When I'm interviewing or trying to figure out if it's the right fit for me, one of my questions I ask is this a time-based role or a task-based role? Time being like, do you need me online from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific? Like, cause you're going to ping me at any minute. Or is it task-based in the sense like, hey, Logan, I just need this run a show by Friday, and I have from Wednesday to Friday to get it done. I could do it at midnight. I could do it at 9 a.m. It doesn't matter. And that came out of a miscommunication I had with a gig once, where I had thought it was task-based, and they were getting frustrated that it wasn't. It was time-based in their minds, because it used to be a full-time person that they could just ping with a question. And I was not at the drop of a hat always ready. And I said, you're not paying me to be on standby.
Yep.
You said it's not full-time, but now you're acting like I'm a full-time. So that's something that's helped me with trying to figure out expectations and then matching that with my capacity.
You said something interesting. When you do have those repeat clients with the repeat crew, it's wonderful. You come in, everybody's capabilities, expectations, you're happy with each other. That's great. There have been a handful of times where I have filled in for somebody that couldn't make the event. So it would be an event that has happened for the last 6 years. They have had the crew. And as the one person coming in that doesn't have that historical context, it's really difficult because um, sometimes there's just a lot of unspoken things, or like, oh, that's not how it was usually done, and it takes some adjustment. And without knowing what questions to ask, it's interesting to be the one new person, and it's really hard to kind of delve into that.
Yeah, I mean that's a challenge I think when you're jumping in, especially if it's just you versus like a whole new organization,
Right.
that has worked. That is my favorite and least favorite question to ask is like, well, what did you do last year? Because people's answer of like, well, that's how we've always done it is like not very satisfactory to me. But also I understand certain clients like we've done it this way. That's the way we want to do it. That's great. Like, but yeah, I think having the understanding like how much information you need from the jump, the longer you're in events, you might be able to figure out like, is this a me thing? Like I usually show call. It's like I love to really know the run of show, and that's just me.
Yeah.
And I really want to know it inside out. So I'm probably going to take a little extra time on this. And that's a me thing versus a client who's wanting lots of calls, wanting lots of meetings, wanting lots of check-in. Well, that's a them thing from a capacity. They're essentially scope creeping on you and
Yeah.
wanting more time than what you'd agreed to. And unfortunately, I feel like for our listeners, like for learning, it's not prescriptive. I can't tell you for sure if you like bill in 10 hours of pre-production as a show caller, you're for sure always going to hit that as the right amount because it's so different based on the event, based on the client, based on the client's their own habits. If there's someone that really wants their hand held and to be your best friend in the lead up, or if they're very hands off of like, we can talk twice before you show up and that's all I need. Or if they're going to send you, I had one client who sent a new email every time something came up versus like one email thread. And
Yeah.
it was a whole thing that I was like, we wasted so much time. And if I had to do 6 events with this one person, it would have taken, it takes 10 times longer than some other folks I work with who are super succinct with like new concept, new thread. But if we're answering that same thread, it's all, that same concept, it's all in the same email thread. So it's easier to project manage.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true.
Thinking back to earlier in your career, Peggy, I'm interested, how many events felt manageable at one time and how has that evolved over the years?
I think earlier in my career, I was, full time with one company and had several events, and that's different than having several events and being freelance. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I like to say, I guess earlier it was just kind of one event at a time, and then when you're freelance, you just kind of say yes to everything and figure it out. So that has definitely changed.
Yeah, I feel like it was kind of, for me, it was like when it rains, I feel like I remember being one at a time, but I was like, it couldn't have been, but it
Yeah.
had to be more. If it rains, it pours. I also was doing a lot more just like kind of on-site execution when I started. And for me, the capacity was interesting because when I went out on my own, I was doing marketing still. And I had some retainer clients that I had to do blog posts for and strategy and social content.
Yeah.
And I remember that being difficult to manage when I was on site. Like you alluded, Peggy, to like the Olympics. I had a memory years ago at like 1 a.m. writing a blog post. And I was like, this is not doable. I had a really long on-site day, but I still owed this stuff. But as a business, I needed those retainer clients to have that stable income for myself. So it was just this realization of like, oh, certain things have to shift. So I need to either commit less to some of this retainer stuff, but then I need to shift that income into more of the on-site stuff. And even now, I think I've talked about it here on the podcast in the past, but like my current model is I try to get what I call pillar events. I try to get like 4 or 5 of them that are that larger dollar amount, larger pre-production. I know I'm going to need to be on call, working heavily in the weeks leading up to that event. But like I can really only do like 4 or 5 of those a year. And that's not overlapping all at once. Maybe like right now I have 2 overlapping.
Mhm.
And if I did a third, my head would probably fall off. It would be too much, but like I need 4 or 5 a year. And then I can sprinkle in the smaller events where it's not as much of a lift. It's only a couple hours of pre-pro in between. And that kind of fills the gaps for me. So that's kind of the model I feel like I've evolved into. to
Yeah.
get the income level that I want. But like at the end of the year, it is shocking to then look and like, I think last year I did like 23 or 24 events, which like, I think objectively someone say, well, you did 33, now you're down to 24. It was like, no, but some of them were more all encompassing. And I'm trying to get to that point. And I did it this last Olympics that we were at, where I was really proud that I'd like limited what other stuff I had going on after the Olympics, so that I was able truly to like just be on the Olympics the whole time, which was great. Instead of having to come home, I think when we were in Paris, I was working on another show that I needed to like do some calls for and stuff. So I was working, and then I'd come home from 10 p.m. to midnight Paris time, taking calls to prep for the next event that was happening like 2 months later. And I remember making a note being like, this is a lot.
Yep.
It's just, your brain is just tired.
Yeah. And you're not fully focused and you're not doing your best. That's, yeah. You just have to recognize that.
Yeah. And it's also different. Like I joked, I was thinking about it now too, like also like your home life. And like single me, when I have like a partner I live with that I'm trying to spend time with, you know, when I'm done working, but like single me, I joke, would be like a work monster and work until 10 or 11 p.m. at night because I can. And that was just what I would do. And so that's one that now he knows I have phases when I go into work monster mode ahead of some certain shows and things. But I definitely think like if I had, you know, kids at home or anything like that would also change my capacity of like, not just necessarily being able to execute events at a high level. I still think you can. It's just maybe you're not as available all the time. And that's an okay. Like those are just different phases of life that we go through. Of, you know, fitting your work to fit your life versus your life to fit your work kind of thinking.
I think, so I do have kids. I've got 3 kids. They're getting older now, you know, they're not babies anymore, but I think it's, in a lot of ways, it's made me better and more structured because I'm like, listen, when they're at school, I think I'm a lot more targeted in what I get done and the hours I have available. And sometimes it forces me to move along instead of, you know, just agonizing over each decision. You're like, hey, no, this decision was made, move on. Come on, let's get through this list. Because sometimes you get held up just wasting a lot of time going back and forth between the options, and there's not a bad option. You just have to make a decision. So in some ways, I've used motherhood to kind of teach me that.
And I think you're not alone. We had another guest come on to talk about like parental leave and parental priorities and things. And that was one of their points, was like, it's just more focused. Like there's kind of like a goal in mind.
Yeah.
Versus being a little more scattered. And I definitely found that when I first worked, like for myself, even, it was funny. I was like, I had a productive week and I would track my time and go back and be like, I only worked 20 hours. That's awesome. But like, it was a productive week. I got everything done that I needed to get done. Like there's this arbitrary rule to work 40 hours a week for folks who are full-time. And so that's just one, especially in events world where like that model just doesn't fit. And I know that's how I feel like a lot of full-time people get burnt out with capacity because you finish event, you're on to the next one. And you know, as a freelancer, yes, you have to hustle for the next gig. And sometimes that is tiring in its own, but I have been better at being a boss to myself of trying to give myself rest after some of these longer events.
Yes.
And even a small capacity, I used to do work with the Seahawks here in town in Seattle, and we'd have game days on Sundays. And it took me like halfway through the season to figure out why I was kind of grumpy on a Monday. And I was like working with people that seemed fine. And I was like, oh, because I took one of my weekend days and it was a work day. So now I'm bringing Tuesday energy to a Monday. I was like, I got to give myself a day off, or at least a half day somewhere else in the week to make up for some of that like mental rest that I missed out on because I had a full work day. Meanwhile, I'm talking to people who are coming off of 2 full days of rest and applying that on a larger scale to some of our other events.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. How do you identify when scope creep is happening across multiple events? Because everyone just wants a little bit more. Oh,
this one is so hard, especially we talked about like focus. And, you know, when you have multiple events at once, this is where you got to have a really good scope of work for your projects.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that totally applies to people working full-time in-house for a company, but like, especially as a freelancer, the amount of times, because sometimes you like pitch for something and you get signed on and that was like 3 months ago. And you're like, what did we even agree to? Because like what I do is I go back to those scope of works all the time to be like, what did I say I was going to do? Okay, cool. This has it laid out. Like I'd said, I was only going to do meetings as needed, or this one says we were going to do weekly check-ins or whatever it is, like having something to go back to. And I didn't do that until probably about like 4 years ago. I got better at this because even, I don't know, you might be better at this, Peggy, but like the larger agencies, it'd be casual, it'd be a producer texting me being like, are you free for this project? You want to be a producer? Great. Love it. Cool. I'll send you an email. And in that email, it just says like a rate, but doesn't break it down based on pre versus on-site or like exactly what they mean by producer. And like, then I would be halfway through in that scope creep. I'm like, is this in scope? Is this out? I have no idea. Like you have nothing to go back to.
Yeah.
And so I've gotten to the point where my agencies don't love to like sign it like a contract, but at least I have a document I send them of like, here's my understanding of what a general session producer does. And in it, it has a section for the agency being like, you will provide the staffing for all the roles, or it literally is bullet points for what they do. And that I'm like, let's just agree if this is what we mean. And that has been super helpful for me to try to get ahead of scope creep. Cause then I can go back and like, look at that. But it happens even today. I just had it a couple weeks ago. I had a client that negotiated me down to only like a few hours of prep work. And they were like, we're not going to need that time. And then they wanted, voice of gods in a very specific voice that I know AI can do. But I said, I don't have any extra time buffered in to be able to like make these for you, but you're welcome to make them and I can play them on site. And they're like, oh no, we were hoping it would just be included. And it's like, unfortunately not. And they've chosen we're just going to do live. Like they're not going to take the extra time for it. But I'm like proud because younger me might've been like, oh, I'll just do it. Cause like, it'll be cool. And they'll be so proud of me. But part of me was like, we had this negotiation and you already cut things and I can add it, but that's an added cost.
Yeah. How do you keep track of hours across multiple projects? Do you have any tips or tricks?
I love Toggle, Toggl. It doesn't have an E at the end. It's an app, but it's also a web browser. And I got into it from my agency that I worked with 10 years ago. I think we used something like this, or maybe a different agency like I started working with. But it's nice because I can assign projects and clients, and I can have multiple projects associated with a client, and it like runs reports for you. So very quickly, if you're like, Logan, how many hours have you spent on the podcast this week? And I also put like podcast as a category.
Yeah.
I do business development's a category. So I have like a bucket. Admin is my like bucket if I don't know where to put something. I used to have a Google sheet with crazy formulas, all kinds of stuff. And then someone introduced me to Toggle and I was like, oh, that's so much easier. And I'm nerdy about my time that I'm just always curious because we all have rose-colored glasses after the fact of like, it didn't take that much time.
Yeah.
And we like go back and look. And I had a client 2 years ago that was like 700 hours and they'd paid me for 300. And it was like, oof, like that hurts. That really
keep track because you forget. One of the things that gets me is sometimes with a new client, we'll say, okay, maybe like 10 hours a week and then on site. But then you start getting the meeting invites and you think, oh my gosh, there's so many meetings and I can't get anything done when I like being a part of them, but that's not working hours for me. That's a lot of information that I need. If maybe I can get bullet points from the meeting, I can do the work, but that starts to creep in and that's my time. So meetings are one. I want to be sometimes they want you to be a part of everything, even though it doesn't necessarily pertain to you. So you have to start, claiming that.
Yeah. And I mean, my advice for like, if this person was like a full-time person, I still think you could use a time tracking tool just to have something to show of like, here's where my time's going. Because some of those projects might be a heavier lift than others. When I'm working with a new client, I've learned I'm a little too nice sometimes. And so I would be like, oh, I'll just treat you like any other, you're a new conference I'm working with. I'll just treat you like any other conference. I was like, I got to kind of treat everybody like they're probably going to be a little higher maintenance than they think they will.
Yeah.
And then it's worked for me for a couple of folks where I kind of say, hey, this proposal, let's include up to 60 hours of prep work. You're saying you don't need me on all the calls and things, but let's just budget based on my rough estimate. Let's do up to 60 and I'll come back to you if we get close to that number. And that gives it more of like a, not feeling like you're a lawyer billing hourly, but it gives them a bucket essentially to pull from. And then that's something depending on what you want to do is if that next year you're like, oh, we were pretty close to 60, let's just keep it. But I had one client, we were like vastly under. And I did do them a solid of like, hey, I have data. We were vastly under, like, I'm going to just let's reduce this actually. So I was able to increase my hourly rate, but I reduced the hours because they truly didn't need me as much as I thought. And I have a couple that I used to do hourly, like actually billing them per hour. And I just didn't love that because I felt like we were disincentivized to align on like creating a great event. Cause if I want to make more money, I should work slower. They would want me to work faster and all of that. So, but I think it is helpful if you're just someone like, I don't know where the time goes. Having a time tracking tool is super helpful because yes, folks in the pre-planning process love to do phone calls. And like you said, Peggy, they're not always the most helpful. How do you think about on-site time versus planning time when you're juggling multiple events? And like, does that factor into how many you can realistically take on?
What exactly are you asking? Like, I feel like when I'm on site, you are paying me for the day, my 10-hour day, and I am completely focused. Unless it's like a site survey or something where I can pepper in calls or whatever. But if I'm on site, I am definitely I really try not to kind of go back and forth between jobs.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, when I'm on site with an event, I don't have to think about any other event until I'm flying away from that event.
Yeah.
That is not always the case for me. Like realistically, I often am in an event and then I go back to my hotel room and at nighttime, so not on the clock with the client I'm on site for, but at nighttime I have to like field questions or answer emails or things like that. And I think I've gotten better over the years of realizing like as long as I communicate effectively like with whoever I'm working with, let's say we're in event A on site, that event B that's happening 3 weeks later knows, hey, I'm on site. I'm limited availability. I can't really take calls, but I can get back to you like each night. You know, I can check something, text me if it's an emergency, but like just letting them know in a way. When I first started, I think I wanted to like act like I could just keep all the balls in the air and not drop one. And occasionally there would be a miscommunication that was like just really frustrating for everybody. Versus it's become such the norm that multiple of us to be, you know, profitable in what we do, you kind of have to be doing multiple events like have multiple events in the pipeline. So I feel like I've gotten better at just letting people know, or now I even do it. Like I have multiple emails I have to use for different clients. And so I'll go, and one of my Friday tasks is I literally update my calendar across all my calendars. So everyone knows if I'm busy or unavailable. And now I've started doing like an out of office in Google Calendar on my other clients' calendars that just says like out of office, but instead of, you can, you know, edit what it says. And I just am like on site for an event, you know, limited response time or like longer response time than normal. And folks usually don't have an issue with it because they want to see when I'm at their event, they want to see that I'm focused on it. So it's kind of like everybody needs to respect each other. But I know that's not always feasible in every single role and with every company, but that's how I've started to curate people who are okay with that to make it manageable.
I think that makes sense. I mean, you're not hired as a full-time person. And when you just say like, you know, I have a 24-hour turnaround on things when I'm actually at an event, I think a lot of people are very understanding about that.
Yeah. And to your point of like knowing capacity of like the week before an event is usually probably like you need to really be available. So like blocking that off if it's a heavy lift show, if meaning there's a lot of moving parts, you've been really a part of it, like not committing to being on site for something else in that week up, especially if they're paying you for it. But this is when there are some people I'm envious in the production world that are truly just like on site only with like a 1 hour phone call before they get there. And they just go from on site to on site to on site. And that's one that I'm like, I've been taking on a few more of those kinds of events. It used to stress me out because I loved being so involved in the process, but I've just learned for like my own mental sanity, I can only be a part of all these shows, like only so many. But if I want to do the projects, I could do that show caller role where I'm just kind of, I get the time on the plane and then I'm there and I'm digesting it live with everybody else from rehearsal. And I kind of like that variety. It's growing on me. I was very resistant at the start, but I just learned I don't have enough hours in the day to give everybody that high level of service they would expect with like a really heavy lift show. And still be happy and get sleep and be a human and do
I
all
think that's common with freelancers. I mean, you see some people take on like some people will be executive producer of some massive event, and then their next one, they're like, you know what? I'm gonna I'm just going to produce breakouts for this mini one that's happening afterwards because I have the time, but I'm coming off of this big one. And you'll see kind of the up and down of that. Because you can come in, that they're perfectly capable. It's more of just a function of they don't have the time to do the big one because they're just coming off of a big one.
Yeah. And your brain, like we all want to be Wonder Woman, but like your brain needs time to reset and recharge, and just going from one to one to one, it can be overwhelming. Do you have any examples, Peggy, of a time when you realized you might have taken on too much at once and what you learned from it?
I think I think it's a lot of times. So we both just got back from Milan, and you have a number of annual clients or events that you do every year, and you think, God, I just really want to hang on to this one. I don't want to give it up. I want to keep sticking with this team. But when you're on a show that is that long and difficult, challenging, you don't really have the bandwidth to keep up with the annual ones. So I guess it didn't necessarily happen to me in Italy, but with the Paris one, I was definitely trying to hang on to a couple of my annual ones, and I wasn't giving them the full focus that I felt that they needed. I maybe should have passed on that. And I'm getting better about knowing what I'm capable of and not saying yes to everything, but it's hard to say no.
It is. And unfortunately, I feel like for capacity, we talked about it being so personal, it is kind of trial and error.
Yeah.
Like it is kind of you, because you also want to like expand as a human. We want to learn and challenge ourselves. So it's like, I do want to try and take on more. Oh, that was too much. Okay, let me scale back a little bit. Okay, now that's not enough. Let me go for it. And like we said, your role at so many different events is so different. So I've definitely had it where, again, full work monster mode. I had the example of when I had the miscommunication with someone about like time versus task was a tough project. For me, I know a symptom of me feeling a little overwhelmed if I've had too much is I feel like I'm going to forget something. And I have this like panic dream that like I forget something really important. It doesn't happen, but it's like in my head. And a tool I created was like just a table in Word where I made boxes for all of my projects. And then it was a brain dump that I could do on like Sunday night or Friday or whatever, just to like, I found I get a lot of like soothing to just get it out of my head and get it on paper of all the random. And because it's boxes, I can just kind of let my brain just like literally dump like, oh, don't forget to do the speaker face sheet for this event. And did we invoice those people? And oh yeah, post on social media, and the podcast has a new episode next. Like it kind of lets me squirrel brain it all out. And then the interesting part is not all of it is immediate and urgent, but just like getting it out helps. Yeah. And I've learned I have too much on my plate if that piece of paper has to be double-sided, essentially 2 pages, because I can fit like, I usually do like 4 on a row. So it's like, I can fit 8 boxes on one sheet. And if I'm on 2 sheets, you're like, okay, probably doing a little too much with too many things. So I've tried to get better. And my answer to be like diplomatic as a freelancer has been just when people ask me for events. Cause I also think the people that hire us don't always know what they need. So when they ask you, are you available and interested? And you're like, yes, because I am available. But it'd be like, I'm always like, can we talk a little bit more about what the like lead up responsibilities are to make sure it fits with my capacity?
Yeah.
Like I might be available for that date, but I got like 17 other things happening before then. Or, if you're wide open, you can just say yes and you figure it out. But I had an event once that I said yes to years ago. I was available in May. The person's like, the dates are in May. I'm not sure which ones. And I was like, I'm wide open in May. Let's do it. I'm down. And then I just was naive and young and didn't ask questions, got on a client call. They start listing out the event dates. Peggy, it was a 4-week virtual event.
Oh,
from like May 3rd until like May 26th.
That's not sometime in May. That's all of May.
Yep. And I was available for all of it, but like the lift. Like, oh, we're just doing like a 2 day. And I just didn't ask because I was just trying to be like nice and excited. And I wanted this opportunity. And like, I just remember that was a moment where I was like, always ask. Because by then it's too late. I'm in, I'm on it. Like, and we got through it and we made it happen. my poor therapist had to hear about it too much. We were literally like counting down the days at one point because it was just like, this is so like, it was too much.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I was getting into. So that is one now that I've just, again, expectations, titles we use, all of that. Like there's just certain things that get assumed, all these assumptions we make that I've just found it's easier to be like, can we just actually talk about like, yeah, what are you asking? Do you need me to have your own email address? Do you need me on these weekly calls? What does that look like? And then make sure that matches with capacity. And then more recently, like this year, you talked about the Olympics. Like I had the Olympics on my calendar. And so when I signed for some events that were happening afterward, I just got ahead of it. And in the like proposal phase, even I was like, normally, I know we normally do check-ins. The time zone is going to be really tough. So honestly, I can't commit to any calls while I'm gone. I can just do emails, but why don't I scaled back a little bit of my pre-production on some projects where I was like, you and I know ahead of time, I'm going to be gone for these 3 weeks. There's nothing you and I can't talk about either before those 3 weeks on a phone call, email while I'm gone, or on a phone call afterward that we couldn't solve.
Yeah.
I literally removed like a weekly check-in with one client because I was like, I'm going to be gone. And instead of trying to be up at 2 in the morning to be on those calls, I was like, I'm super available before. I'm going to be very available after. Like,
Yeah.
but that one chunk. So
you mentioned your Word document. A lot of times what I do to keep track of questions or just outstanding items is a lot of times when you're freelance, you'll get an email address from the company that you're working for, or production house or whatever. And I'll just have a draft email, not to anybody, but it'll just be notes and outstanding things. And I know like if I have a couple of drafts, they're going to different people. It's different questions. Sometimes it's more admin stuff. Sometimes it's more production stuff. But when I see that there's how many drafts I have, okay, I'm like, okay, let's start cleaning this up. These 5 questions go to them but it's just one, everyone has their own way of doing it. But I just, I know that if I need to clean out my draft emails, it's because there's questions that I have that are outstanding.
I love that method. Yeah, I think it's like whatever works for you. I'm a big, like, I think, and a lot of planners, I know we love our lists. So it's like, yeah, whatever place those helpful lists are in, or yeah, all the links and the logins that come along with managing multiple projects.
And I think that's when I do these draft emails, a lot of times they are just lists, and I'll pull it up during a call thinking, okay, on this call, 3 of these things are relevant. And then I'll delete them off of my draft if they're answered. But it's just, that's just the way I keep track of things.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this answers your question a little bit more, listener. I highly encourage, if you are full-time and take on those 6 events and they are fully blown the whole time, to like track your time and have some stats for later to show kind of where some of your time went. But that does, to me, at least sound like a lot if you're in 6 all at once. But it is so personal. So trial and error and figuring it out. But that brings us to the end of our episode. And Peggy, you have our bonus tip this week.
Yes. Bonus tip, a lot of times for corporate events, if you're not doing voiceover, VOGs, voice of God, if you're not doing VOGs live, I like to have them recorded, and voicetalentnow.com is usually my go-to for that. They're really easy to work with. It's kind of a quick turnaround time, and they're reasonably priced. So I like them.
And I love that as a real alternative to AI, because I have had a lot of clients using AI, which is also a cost-effective way to do it, but you can still tell the difference of a human voice.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so too.
And Peggy, this is also your last episode being my guest co-host. So I want to say thank you so much. You crushed it. Did you have some fun, hopefully, with our listeners and doing this whole podcast thing?
It was a lot of fun. And wow, you have got this dialed. You're 250 episodes in, and you definitely are you're very streamlined and organized. I love this.
No, thanks, Peggy. Appreciate you being here. And we'll put your profile and everything in the show notes so folks can keep in touch with you if they would like to connect. But That brings us to the end of our episode, and you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Better Events Pod. You can send us an email at bettereventspod@gmail.com. You can also connect with us directly on LinkedIn. Myself, Mary, and Peggy would love to hear from you, but just please put in that little messaging box when you go to connect that you heard about us through the podcast. And if you want more Better Events content, you can join our private community over on Substack. And as always, we want to thank you for listening, and we'll be back in your feeds again next Wednesday.